Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to call the regular Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for Wednesday, May 28th, 2012 to order. And may we all rise for the pledge, please. What do you pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Ms. McGill, could we have roll call, please?
Chair Wiscombe.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
K-Spear.
Here.
Ferrara.
Here.
Longstreet.
Here.
Intern Yee. Jacobson and Trentikoski are not present.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McGill. Ms. Rapp, are there changes to the agenda, please?
Yes, Chair Wiscombe. Staff would recommend that after item 6, which is the Golf Advisory Committee interviews and appointments, that you take item 9, the annual IPM report, and then following that with items 7 and 8.
Okay, thank you very much. And there are no written communications, correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. Is anyone here to speak on any matter that is not on our agenda for public comment? Okay, seeing that there's no one, we will close public comment. And we're going to move on to community service recognition. Ms. Ho, welcome. Oh, Ms. Rapp, sorry.
That's okay. And Anita Ho will make the presentation of these 2 awards.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Neighborhood and Outreach Services offers a teen culinary arts program, especially designed for junior and senior high school students of the community. We receive requests from younger students to join the program, but given the structure of the curriculum, we prefer to get the most mature students who are about to graduate and seek employment. This Healthy Option for Youth program is offered at no cost to the youth and is funded 100% through grants and donations. 3 years ago, we began the program and were aware that the Adele Davis Foundation's goal was to educate the community on healthy eating. We therefore approached Eloise Dilling, the president of the foundation, for support. She immediately and enthusiastically came on board and has provided funding every year since the existence of the program. Each year, our students at both sites, the Franklin and the Westside Center, host a VIP luncheon to show off what they have learned. Many of you commissioners have attended that and know how special it is. Ms. Dilling has attended every single one of those luncheons at both sites. You can always spot her. She's the one sitting, talking, and interacting with the families of the students and wearing a big smile. She's so proud of the students and the work that they have accomplished. Now in our 3rd year, she continues to fund and watch the growth and accomplishment of the students. The Park and Recreation Department would like to recognize the generosity and moral support that Eloise has provided to the students. Her personal contribution to the youth is especially appreciated. The teens will always remember her big smile and look of approving every time she sees them. Eloise, the teens, the chef, the volunteers, and the staff, thank you for your support. Eloise.
Ms. Dilling, thank you very much on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Department and the Parks and Recreation Commission. We'd like to present you with this certificate, and thank you to the foundation for all that you do. It's a wonderful program. I've been to the lunches, and they're fantastic. So thank you for all that you do. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you for the award. I'm going to put it on my office wall. Thank you.
As mentioned before, the Teen Culinary Arts depends on grants, donation, and volunteers for its existence. For our very survival, we seek individuals, foundation, institutes who share our goal of educating the youth of the community in healthy eating and exercise. We first met Patricia Bragg almost 30 years ago when our department formally sponsored the Santa Barbara Triathlon as a fundraiser for Special Olympics. Patricia was the first one on board, providing funds, products, and personal support for the runners. Yes, she was there at 3 in the morning in the dark, helping us to set up. No one is more cheerful than Patricia at 3 a.m. in the morning. About 6 years ago, we approached her again because we wanted to provide a program called Heartfelt Heart Fit at our after-school program for the Youth Activities Program. The program helped elementary-aged children exercise for their heart and do good deeds for their character. She again came aboard with funding. For the last 3 years of the culinary arts, again, this fits right into the goal of a healthy lifestyle and healthy cooking she has supported. She knows it's important to teach the youth this message at a very young age and with hands-on experience in the kitchen. The Parks and Recreation Department would like to recognize the generosity of Patricia Bragg as she has provided to the students. Her contribution and kindness to the youth is greatly appreciated. Patricia?
Ms. Bragg, thank you for all that you do for the program for Healthy Options for Youth. And you've done some amazing things, and we truly appreciate it. On behalf of the Parks and Recreation Department and the Parks and Recreation Commission, we'd like to present you with this certificate of appreciation. Thank you so much. Would you like to say a few words? Here, let's adjust the mic.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I'd like to say that the Parks and Recreation is so very important in Santa Barbara, and I'm very pleased to be part of it for the past 30 years. And also, I thank Anita for all that she does, and I would like to say that it's so important. I brought this little pillow. To teach is to touch a life forever. And with what she's doing with teaching the children how to cook, it is so wonderful, because the Bragg healthy lifestyle is this: you are what you eat, what you drink, what you breathe, what you think, say, and do. You have 640 muscles, and if you don't use them, you lose them. I wrote the Triathlon Training Manual 35 years ago, and I trained people like Dave Scott, who's won 6 Ironman triathlons, and he called my book the Book of Health and Fitness. And this is what the Parks and Recreation is doing here in Santa Barbara. And I'm very thrilled to be part of it. And my godfather was Del Webb, who brought high tech to Santa Barbara with Raytheon, Delco, Applied Magnetics, and Santa Barbara Research. He loves Santa Barbara, and I love Santa Barbara. Thank you for this honor.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just also like to say that the Park Foundation is having the Condor Cruise May 4th, and the youth are providing the hors d'oeuvres for it, and we are very proud to have them for the second time, and they represent our community so well in the Parks and Recreation Department, and thank you for everything you do. And one last thing, I think we should honor our own Anita Ho, who was named Kiwanis, I probably can't say that, Kiwanis, is that right, of the year, and was just in the paper, and it just gives from her heart all the time also. So thank you, Anita.
And if I could add, the Parks and Recreation Department has learned over the years, over and over and over, how much we need people in the community to step up and partner with us. And this is a perfect example of a program that would not exist without your support. And for that, as Commissioner Longstreet mentioned, the Park Foundation choosing to recognize and support this program with their fundraiser of the Sunset Cruise, that's really, it's a lot of good efforts coming together for a terrific program. So thank you very, very much. May 4th, Friday, May 4th at 5:30. So more information to come, but thank you very much.
And it's a really fun event. We have a great time. We'd love to see you there. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we are moving on to Mr. Yee. Welcome, who's going to give us the Youth Council report.
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. So yesterday, the City Council passed the Youth Council resolution, which formally establishes the Youth Council as an official city advisory body. There are two options for the transition and we were all very worried that the first option, which would dissolve the Youth Council this year, and that we would all have to reapply. But the City Council passed the second option, which states that the seniors on the Youth Council would retire upon graduation. The rest of the current Youth Council would have their terms extended until June 30th, 2013, with the current alternate member appointed as the 13th member through that date. Sufficient at-large members would be recruited during the 2012 recruitment process to achieve a membership of 15 members. New at-large members would be appointed without regard to their school or place of residence. The membership qualifications specified in the proposed resolution would start with the appointments for fiscal year 2014. So I know staff and many commissioners have been working very hard trying to get this passed through City Council, and I, representing the Youth Council, thank you for that. And also, at our last meeting, we discussed the Milpas pedestrian safety situation, which I know is a very big deal since there was a teenager killed in the accident. So we were trying to make a decision about which option would be the safest for the street. However, we did not think that we would have the necessary knowledge to make an informed decision. So we are inviting the traffic committee engineer, I believe.
Traffic safety engineer,
Traffic
Derek
safety
Bailey.
engineer, yeah. We're inviting him to come explain to us more about what the process, or what options we really have, and what they would entail, so that we can make an informed decision. And that was our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that great report. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. Great. We'll move on to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. As usual, I'll start down here with Mr. Ferrara.
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. I attended the last month we had our Integrated Pest Management Advisory Committee meeting, at which time was presented the draft 2011 annual report. And this is the 8th report. They started the strategy and the IPM program back in 2004. And I just want to say real quickly and add here, now in the 8th year of the IPM program, the city has seen a decrease from 289.3 units to 7.06 units of what's considered red high-hazard pesticides for use in highly challenging pest management problems. This year, they've used 0. So that's quite a feat, and it's really, really a good thing. So I just wanted to put that out there and thank them for all they do. And also I want to mention that there's 2 positions available, well, actually 1 position available on the Integrated Pest Management IPM Advisory Committee. 1 position at large and 1 PAC pending position, which may be available, but we're not sure about that one yet. So anybody out there who's interested in becoming a member and serving on the Integrated Pest Management Advisory Committee, please check with the city. They'll be glad to have you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrara. Ms. Longstreet.
This month, I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting where also we discussed the Milpas pedestrian safety, and it is a very complicated issue and probably will definitely end up at a council for a decision, but the community is, I think, really working their way through all of the alternatives and, to see what comes forward. And also the Park Foundation met this month, both the regular meeting and the fundraising. And as I said earlier, we will be having the Condor Cruise on May 4th, and very excited about that. And we hope everyone will buy tickets and support the Park Foundation. The proceeds will go to the Youth Teen Culinary Arts Program and and scholarships. Isn't that correct? That's our.
Thank you, Ms. Longstreet. Mr. Casebeer.
Yes, I also attended the Park Foundation fundraising meetings and looking forward to the cruise. On the Creeks Advisory, the meeting was canceled this last week, but the previous month we are discussing the Lower Mission Canyon, Mission Creek project, and the bridge, the Mason Street Bridge and the Chapala Street Bridge continue to be, we're working on that with staff.
Thank you, Mr. Casebeer. Mr. Burns?
Well, not to be overdone, I've also been to the Park Foundation and doing a lot of good things with the Park Foundation. But another item that's coming up that really has no real place on the agenda, so I'm just taking it here, is I've had some health issues. And I basically this morning had a doctor tell me that the process needs to start for me to get a new kidney. And I'm going to resign from this commission and some of the other commissions that I'm involved with, either effective May, June, or July, and we'll get those details worked out. But I'm still here, and we'll be back once I'm better.
You will be sorely missed.
Yes.
Yes. A big black hole. So, at any rate, thank you, Mr. Burns. Okay, I have a couple things to report. On March 1st, I attended the regular Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, and the trees that we reviewed on site are in your agenda packet today for action. And on February 29th, I had the distinct pleasure of attending the Youth Impact Awards, which was just a great event. And I'd like to congratulate Michael Yee, who was one of the distinguished honorees at the event, and also a big congratulations to the Santa Barbara Youth Council, who won one of the 3 2011 Impact Awards, which was really cool. They put together a great presentation, and were there in full force. I think your whole committee was there, weren't they, pretty much? And it was a great event, and also the other winners. It was fun to see everybody. And I'm just going to quote here, because this really kind of sums it up. This is a quote from Gandhi on the program itself, and it says, "A small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can alter the course of history." And I think all the award winners and the Youth Council, that's what they're doing. So I'd just like to congratulate you. It was wonderful to be there. Yeah. Okay, that concludes that. We're going to move on. Commission and staff communications, do we have anything?
Chair Wiscombe, I have several things.
Oh, okay.
First, I'd like to follow up with a comment on Commissioner Burns' notification today to the Commission, and add my deep appreciation for all that you've done. I know your health is your focus, and we know you'll be back up to snuff pretty quickly. But that does leave us the opportunity to have a vacancy for the commission go forward with the next recruitment for council boards and commissions. So anyone who is interested in submitting for that vacancy, those notifications, that process will begin in about mid-April. So, and don't hesitate to contact me or any of our other commissioners if you have any questions. So I just wanted to put that out there, because we have a very effective commission, and we're anxious to make sure we have a full, complete commission as of July 1st. I also wanted to inform the commission, Chair Wiscombe, representing Santa Barbara Beautiful, as well as the Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Parks and Recreation Department and the Park Foundation have been participating in a fairly broad community effort to celebrate National Public Gardens Day, which is going to be Friday, May 11th. And we had a partners meeting earlier this week, and we've got the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, Lotus Land, Casa del Herrero, the City Parks and Recreation, county parks for the courthouse, the Santa Barbara Zoo, the Old Mission. So right now, the Santa Barbara Foundation, I understand, is coming on board. And so all of us are coming together and defining tours that we're going to do for the public as part of that day. The city will be doing tours at 3 of our parks. We're going to do tours at Mission Historical Park and the Rose Garden. We'll also be doing tours at Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens and include the Alameda. We will also be doing Chase Palm Park, the newer portion of the park, on the mountainside of Cabrillo. And the Park Foundation is going to sponsor free carousel rides as part of the event. So a lot of really exciting things coming. We'll be making a presentation to you at your April meeting with some of the partners to just kind of highlight everything. But we're very excited to be a part of this event, which will help the community have a greater understanding and appreciation for public gardens. And so with all the budget challenges we've been suffering under, both public and private garden operations, it's really a great opportunity to remind people what a value we are in the community. So we're very pleased to be a part of that. And today, the Parks and Recreation Department, and especially the Parks Division, celebrated Mark Roush, who is a parks supervisor and retiring after 27 years. So we had a good crowd of people that gathered at Schofield Park for a barbecue, and Mark's family joined us, and Mark is one of those people that will leave a big hole in our department. I described him earlier today as strong, quiet leader. And I also complimented him that I had never in my years being the director ever had to field a complaint related to Mark in terms of what he did or didn't do or how he did what he did. And, that just says a lot. I mean, instead, I have just had compliments, because whether we're right or wrong, people always have an opinion on things. So, but, Mark has really done so much for our sports fields, our beaches and waterfront areas, our open space parks, Parma and Schofield and others. He's just touched so many areas of the Santa Barbara park system over the years. So it was nice to get together today and express that appreciation to him. And then I do have one more presentation that I'm going to invite Kevin Strasberg up to do. But I did want to just, was there, Commissioner Longstreet, did you want to make a comment?
I just wanted to say that, Mark will really be missed. And it says something about the department, how long people stay and what a invaluable job they do. And I wish him the best in his retirement.
Thank you. So we celebrated something this week that probably only a few people that happen to use Stevens Park on a regular basis even knew happened. But it was really pretty special, so we wanted to share it with you. So I asked Kevin, who oversaw the project, if he would put some slides together for you to talk a little bit about what happened at Stevens Park this week. Kevin?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm here today to do this little presentation about the bridge and the project, Stevens Park Bridge reinstallation. All came about over there at Stevens Park, the neighborhood park, 25. Oh, pardon me. The project happened in Stevens Park. It's a neighborhood park, 25 acres. It's loved by many, and there's picnic areas, and it's the trailhead to Hescita Trail, and it also has San Roque Creek in it, and that is what the bridge resides over. And 258 Cannon Drive is where it's located, if you're not familiar with the park. Here's a map showing the creek running through it and where the bridge would be located. The bridge was removed in 2009 for fear of potential greater flooding caused by the bridge and the silt coming down the hill from the fire. And I was requested to pull it out. So we pulled the bridge out and stored it in the parking lot. And here we are 3 years later, and we've had plenty of growth up there in the hills, and it was time to put it back. So I was requested to put the bridge back. And last week we hired a specialty crane to come out and fly the bridge into place, and I had several support staff members from Parks come out and give me all the backup I needed to get the bridge into place. And it, from the photos here, it looks pretty easy with 1 or 2 guys in the picture, but we probably had a crew of 25 out there with forestry and Parks and the 5 or 6 crane members out there. So it was quite a fun project. And there it is. It's in place and ready for the public and the summer season and fun. And how nice it is to actually have water running under it today. And really, that's the end of the presentation. It was short and sweet.
Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
And it's really beautiful because that gives access to half of that park, basically.
Absolutely. And you don't have to go through the creek to get to the other side. So, although
Excellent.
the kids love it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
That conclude your... Usually we don't have anything, so it's like, oh, okay. That was fun-packed. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. Agenda item number 3, summary of council actions. Ms. Rep, did you have anything to say on those, or any commissioners have any questions, or no? Okay. Agenda item number 4 is approval of minutes. Now, we have 2 sets of minutes because we had a special site visit, both the same day, February 22nd, 2012, and then we had our regular meeting in the afternoon of February 22nd, 2012. So does anyone have any discussion, or?
I move approval of the minutes of February 22nd, 2012, both the special meeting and the regular meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. I think Mr. Ferrara seconded it. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that unanimously carries. Good. Okay, so now we are moving on to agenda item number 5, which is Street Tree Advisory Committee items, and any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission made pursuant to the Municipal Code, Chapter 15.24, Preservation of Trees, may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days. And welcome, Mr. Downey. We are on 26 West Padre Street.
Chair Wiscom and Commissioners, 26 West Padre Street is a Tipuana tupu tree that was planted directly behind the city street tree of the same species. The tree has potential to get probably 6 times the size that it is now. And with the two trees so close, the applicant is wanting to remove the tree to provide space for the street tree and also provide some additional sunlight for their plants in the front yard. Also have concerns about the eventual size of the tree causing damage to the property. The Street Tree Advisory Committee reviewed the application and visited the site. They determined that they would like to recommend approval of this removal. They had commented that the principles of good forest management would best be served by this removal, and so their recommendation is to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Does anyone have any questions? Do we have any speakers on this item? No. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or discussion? We can open it up for discussion and questions.
I'll make a motion.
Go for it, Mr. Ferrara.
Make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation to remove the tipu at 26 West Padre Street.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Farrar made the motion. Mr. Casepier seconded it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on to agenda item 5B. And is there anyone here to speak on that? No. Okay. 5B is 1722 Mountain Avenue. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscom and Commissioners, 1722 Mountain Avenue has a rather small liquid amber American sweet gum tree. The tree currently is about 30 feet tall, has a potential to reach 70 to 80 feet tall, rather small front yard. They have concerns also about their foundation. Surface rooting is causing damage to the public sidewalk, their private sidewalk, and their driveway. The Street Tree Advisory Committee reviewed the application materials and went to the site. They determined that the potential size of the tree is much too large for the lot, and their recommendation is to conditionally approve on the condition the tree is replaced with a tree that has potential to reach this height, which is 30 feet. So that is their recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. Questions, discussion, seeing that we have no public comment? Any? Yes.
I just have
Yes, Mr. Casepier.
one question. Are there trees that have root systems, Mr. Downey, that don't disturb sidewalks and foundations? That, like for replacement purposes, like in this situation?
Chair Wiscom and Commissioner Casepier, tree roots grow where they can find air and moisture. If the only place they can find air and moisture is at the surface, that's where they'll put roots out. I provided the applicant with a document that we have developed, which helps people make decisions about how and where to plant trees, how to care for those trees, which includes watering to help prevent some of that damage. Yes, that's document. They are very excited about the prospect to plant something different in there that they can grow into the space that will fit better than this tree.
Good. And here's a copy which is available at the Parks and Rec office on Laguna Street. And that address is?
Chair Wiscom and Commissioners, the document is available online on the forestry webpage, or a copy can be picked up at 402 East Ortega.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Ferrara.
Yes, Mr. Downey, there is no designated street tree for that area, for that street then?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, there is a designated tree. I don't have the information in front of me, but this is a setback tree, and the accoutrements in the parkways that exist now wouldn't support a street tree.
Very good, yeah. So what kind of a native shade tree? That could be any number of trees? That's the replacement tree, or how does that narrow down? Are they the ones who are going to pick the tree?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, the applicant suggested that they would plant a native. The Street Tree Advisory Committee didn't want to limit them to a native tree. That's why the recommendation is a shade tree of about 30 feet. I am in process of working with the applicant through that document to decide on what tree they will replace it with if the commission approves.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
I'd make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation at 1722 Mountain Avenue.
Okay. Motion by Ms. Longstreet, seconded by Mr. Casebeer. And any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Downey. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda item number 6 under old business, which is the Golf Advisory Committee interviews and appointments. We have 2 vacancies, and I am to correct the application of Bob, is it Swider or Sweeter? Okay, thank you. The application that you have in your packet says that who will you represent, and he says he'll represent Santa Barbara Men's Golf. That's incorrect. He's actually applying at this point for the community at large position. So, yeah. So, because we already have Dominic is already the representative for the. Yeah, but he's already the rep for the men's club. So, yes, Ms. Rep.
Chair Wiscombe, we had a follow-up conversation with Dominic, and we understand that there may be some change in the future, but we currently have the at-large vacancy, and so Mr. Sweeter, if he is still interested in applying to be on the GAC, can apply and potentially be appointed to that position. And if, in fact, at a future time, there's a change with Dominic's position as the Santa Barbara Men's Club rep, that is something that we can work out in the future. So we do understand that you had some conversations with them about both of you wanting to be involved and how that would work, but this is how we'll start.
Okay, great. Okay, and Gretchen Ostergren is, Gretchen Ostergren. Okay, Ms. Ostergren, why don't we start with you? So we have 2 vacancies, one for the executive women's golf and another one for a community at-large position on Golf Advisory Committee, and we're here to interview both of them. You have the applications in your packet. And Ms. Ostergren, would you like to step forward, please? Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for applying. And would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself? And
I'm a registered nurse at Cottage Hospital.
Put the mic. Yeah, great. Thank you.
I'm a registered nurse at Cottage Hospital, and I've been golfing in this community for about 20 years. I play with Executive Women's Golf. I also play with the women's group on Wednesdays. I've worked part-time in the golf shop. I had at one time decided I was going to go pro and do the LPGA thing, which I decided that nursing would pay a little bit better, so I stayed in that. So I have been golfing for a long time. I was born in Santa Barbara at Cottage Hospital, didn't go very far. And so I would like to be a part of the committee for Executive Women's Golf and whatever else I would be fit to help out with.
Great, thank you. Does my fellow commissioners, anyone have questions of Ms. Ostergren? Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
You know that the last few years, the golf course has been undergoing some changes.
Correct.
And really, we've been very dependent on the Golf Advisory Committee to be active. And do you have any ideas in there what you would like to see happen to increase rounds of play?
I think that the things that have been going on with Chris and some of the other people that have been behind the scenes at the Muni Golf Course have done a really fantastic job. The course is in better shape than it's ever been. I think all of the structural changes that have happened have been really great. I think that it's really beautiful at this point, and I just think that the economy has really taken a toll on the rounds of play. I know that in our group, we promote a lot of new golfers coming in and people that have never even touched a golf club. We have them coming in and learning the game, and we do a program. It's called Mentor Mentee. That actually starts next month, where we have people that have never played before come out and work with people that have played, and we sort of teach them and bring them along. And it introduces them to the game, and we play 9 holes after work. I call it the after-school special, but it's literally like an after-work kind of thing. And in bringing new women into the course, it gives them the ability then to be able to play with their spouses or their, significant others, whatever. And it shows them what Muni's all about, because a lot of times you'll hear the municipal courses don't get the recognition that they should, and it's, do you play at Sandpiper or Glen Annie or Rancho San Marcos or, or if you're in Montecito, do you play at any of the clubs that are there? So I guess a long-winded answer to answer that is that I feel like Executive Women's Golf is doing that on a regular basis by bringing in new golfers to expose them to the game, and hopefully that will end up making it a win-win for both of us. It brings us new members, and it brings more people into the golf course.
Thank you. We just so appreciate all the work that the Golf Advisory Committee has done, and it continues to do. So we're glad you're interested.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
First off, thank you for your willingness to play the game.
Absolutely.
And support the game. On this mentor-mentee program, is there one available for men?
Actually, Executive Women's Golf Association has 2 male members. So you're welcome to join the group. You're welcome to play. You're welcome to,
Okay. Thank you.
Sounds like a dream come true to me.
It is.
I'll bring my wife along.
Well, one of the male members we have, his wife does play there, but the other male member, his wife doesn't play at all, and he really enjoys playing with women, so he comes and plays with us all the time. He's a regular member.
Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Yes.
I would move that we appoint Gretchen.
Thank you.
To the Golf Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for applying, and welcome to the GAC. It's a great committee.
My pleasure.
They think outside the box a lot, and which I think in these kind of times we all need to do. And it's a good group of people that really have a passion for the sport, which you obviously do. So, welcome. Thank you.
And nobody asked me what my index was.
Well, once you said LPGA, and I thought, I'm not even going there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Sweeter, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I landed in Santa Barbara in 1982. I fell in love with Santa Barbara. I traveled extensively, and I thought Santa Barbara had everything, all the accoutrements of a beautiful metropolitan city without the crime, congestion, and the pollution. So I decided to make it my home, and I've been golfing for 50 years. I've been a member of the Santa Barbara Men's Club for 25 years. I'm a USGA member and a Southern California Golf Association member. I like the game. My index is 15.7, so I'm just a bogey golfer. but I strive to do better. I think there's room for improvement in the golf course, and I think there's room to make the golf course one of the top 10 in the country. So I'm here to help out. I've got some, I can't say expertise, but I've worked on a golf course. I've worked for a resort. I know both ends of the equation, so I think I could contribute quite a bit to help the success of the golf course.
Great, thank you very much. Questions? Yes,
I do.
Mr.
Yes,
Farrar,
thank you,
yes.
Chair Wiscombe. Yes, Mr. Sweeter, I'd put the same question to you that Ms. Longstreet put to Ms. Ostergen. What do you think you can bring to the committee, and how do you think you can help improve rounds? What do you think they should do there or would help out?
Well, there's a few opportunities. There's a core group of golfers, groups of golfers that golf there on a regular basis. And I think you could apply some incentives for them to golf even more because you have that captive audience already. So that would be one avenue. Maybe a couple more city tournaments that would promote golfers from the surrounding communities to come in and play and give you an opportunity to showcase the course to new people.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel? Do you feel the course is in the best shape it's been in a long time, or?
Well, I can't honestly say that, but it's in good shape. I think it could be in better shape, and it's going to take some time because the growth rate of grass, it's not instantaneous, so it's going to take a while.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Sure, Mr. K-Spear.
I move that we approve Bob Sweeter's appointment to the Golf Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Passes unanimously. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for serving. It's one of our little gems that we really want to protect and nurture along, and there are challenges with it, as we all know. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Great. That concludes agenda item 6. Now we are moving on to agenda item number 9. Mr. Escobar for the IPM 2011 annual report. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners. I'm Santos Escobar, the City of Santa Barbara Parks Manager and also the city's IPM coordinator as well. I'm looking forward to presenting our 8th annual IPM annual report. Before I start, though, I'd just like to thank our Citizens Advisory Group consisting of Greg Chittick, Oscar Carmona, Kristen Labonte, Christina McGinnis, and Corey Wells, who have helped served on this advisory committee, and also then just thank city staff as well for all the hard work that we've done throughout the year, implementing our IPM program, putting together the report. These folks consist of Jeff McKee from the airport, James Dewey from Public Works, Judd Connolly from the waterfront, Carl Treiberg from the waterfront, Joe Poirier from the fire department, and also my park staff, which consists of Ken Brown, Steve Takaya, Mark Roush, John Mead, Terry Amada, and also a big thanks this year to Carla McGill for helping on the report as well. And also, Mark Reed with the golf course. And one last individual, Mr. Joe Gonzalez with building maintenance. Integrated Pest Management, also known as IPM, is an effective and environmentally sensitive decision-making system of pest management. The goal is to minimize health, environmental, and financial risks. Just a quick background, our city commitments always to be protecting our resources for future generations. In 2003, our IPM policy was adopted by City Council. 2004, IPM strategy was adopted, required a development of a zone system for IPM implementation, and that was council-driven as well. In 2005, our City Council directed our staff to develop a fair zone model. A pesticide hazard and exposure reduction model is what it stands for. In 2006, the model was adopted. Our IPM strategy promotes the use of non-hazardous and or reduced risk alternatives that are protective of human health and the environment, which also reduces and eliminates the use of pesticide products that possess known, likely, or probable human health or environmental risks. The pesticide hazard and exposure reduction or FAIR model assigns green, yellow, or special circumstances red zones and allows the use of carefully screened materials by zone designations. Just as a reminder, city parks is composed of 98% green zones, or 1,450 acres. A 2% is yellow, or 26 acres within our system. An example of an all-green park is Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens. It's an all-green park. An example of a partial yellow park is our Mission Rose Garden and also the Mission Ruins. And as you can see from this slide, you'll see the areas that, if needed, we will go through and spray yellow materials. We do our darndest not to. We always select green materials first, and if we have to, then we will go through and apply yellow materials. So our city-wide highlights. This past year, our applications of materials decreased from 3,983 units in 2010 to 3,277 units. The units of green material increased from 2,061 to 2,461, and that was primarily for mosquito control. The units of yellow material decreased from 1,633 units to 809. The units of red material decreased from 289 to 7. And the number of times pesticides were applied increased 186 in 2010 to 212 in 2011. And once again, that's primarily due to mosquito control in our Goleta Slough and also at our bird refuge. And here's a chart going back to 2004 to 2011, and you can see just the dramatic differences in regards to green material being used and being selected. The airport department highlights the units of pesticides applied decreased from 2,979 units in 2010 to 2,539 in 2011. The units of green materials increased from 1,169 to 1,755. The units of yellow material decreased from 1,531 to 784. And the big one here is the red materials decreased from 279 to 0. So we were able to control mosquitoes by using green materials. And we did a banner job. The airport spent 5,140 hours performing alternative pest management practices. And this is the use. The golf division highlights. The units of pesticides applied increased from 17 in 2010 to 18 in 2011. The units of green materials increased from 0.25 to 0.28. The use of yellow materials increased from 6 to 10. The units of red material decreased from 10 to 7. The golf course continues to brew microorganisms, and the utilization of compost tea for greens, as well as mulching the golf course as needed. And Mr. Mark Reed, our golf course manager, is here for questions if needed. And you can tell the difference from 2003 to 2011, just a dramatic decrease in pesticide use. The Parks Division highlights the units of pesticide applied increased from 8 in 2010 to 9 in 2011. The units of materials decreased from 2 to 0. And the reason that occurred was because we still have not been able to find any alternative herbicide, any green herbicides that truly work. If you need to realize that the costs for herbicides, when they're green, they currently still are anywhere from 5 to 10 times more expensive. And also, they do put off an aromatic smell that sometimes are offensive to folks when we spray, and it's a little longer lasting. And so when we have applied those in the past, we have gotten many calls of, what are you doing? Even though we may say it's lavender oil or it's citrus oil, we still get the calls. And no red materials were applied. We spread 840 yards of mulch, which is a lot of mulch that was applied. We continue to do our darndest. This mulch also makes us definitely a sustainable city. This mulch has been taken from wood chips that our forestry section has gone through and chipped through our own chippers. The Parks Division spent 7,316 hours performing alternative pest management. Public Works Department highlights the units of pesticides applied decreased from 980 in 2010 to 711 in 2011. The units of green materials decreased from 890 to 706. The units of yellow material decreased from 90 to 5. No red materials were applied. And the material use here is through the environmental services with Public Works. And once again, that's to control mosquitoes throughout the city, not only at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge, but there could be phone calls that folks call that need some help to go through and apply a little green material. Public Works continues to use trapping for rodent control. You'll see this on State Street. You'll see this in the harbor. You'll see this in other facilities as well. We do not use any baits. It's all trapping. The Citizens IPM Advisory Committee, they met on March 6th, and the Advisory Committee voted unanimously to approve the IPM 2011 annual report and to move it forward to our Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as moving it forward to Council for review and approval. So at this time, the Parks and Recreation Commission, we recommend that you also accept the report and forward this off to City Council as well. And Commissioner Longstreet, I know you'd like to see a couple little photos. And so here we are doing some work at the, on the left-hand side is our Mission Rose Garden, the A.C. Postal Memorial Rose Garden, and we're applying mulch. We apply 500 yards of mulch here, and we go through and do this to over 1,600 roses here at this site. You know, working hard there, and then we have our grounds crew leader doing some hula ho weeding right here at the corner of Milpas and Cabrillo Boulevard. Doing a bang-up job. So at this time, if you have any questions, we're here to answer them. And once again, I have with me Mr. Jeff McKee from the airport and Mr. Mark Reed from the golf course.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Appreciate the report. It was great. I'll open it up to the commission for questions. Yes, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Santos, I remember when I was at the meeting, we were talking about an increase in gophers, I think it is this year in the city. Was it gophers? Is it correct? And if so, what should residents do if they have an infestation or too many gophers? Is there a number they can call the city to help them out with that, or what would be the procedure?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Farrar, there's no doubt this year in my entire career, working for the city and outside the city, the gopher infestation is just out of control. I've never seen this before. Also, our other park supervisors who have, combined years working out in the field of at least 100 years feel the same way. And we've never seen this type of infestation. We are trapping daily at all our sites. And for folks that are watching this, they wouldn't call me for us to go out and trap in their yards, but the best thing to do is to call a pest control company to help with trapping, or for them to go through and trap themselves and just visit a local nursery or a chemical supply house to help out. But yes, it's definitely been a challenge this past year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Longstreet?
I'd just like to commend the staff throughout the city, because as difficult as the budget times have been, and I know this is labor intensive, but to see the decline in the use of the pesticides and the red materials, and that you're keeping all these areas, the airport, the golf course, all throughout the city looking good, really appreciate that. I know it's a committed effort on everyone's part, and thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Yee.
So it seems like the general trend is that the pesticide use is decreasing. And does that mean that pests are finally decreasing, the number of pests are finally decreasing, or people are not calling, or?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Yee, just so you realize, we have ups and downs every single year, so it is a dynamic duel in regards to, you just never know what can exist. 1 year, once again, but this year we have very little rainfall, so we'll maybe apply a little less material, but every year can change, and every year we can get a pest that arrives into California that you just never know, that can start to go through and defoliate trees, go through and do major damage, and then we'd have to work together and decide how to go through and control these particular pests. So in regards to what you're wanting an answer for, it would be no, because you never know from 1 year to the next. It's just, this year is just an anomaly, so we're grateful for that.
But the amount of red materials used has been decreasing, so what's the reason for that?
Correct. Well, in regards to the decrease in the red material, that was material that was used for not only for some of the golf greens, and we've been able to go through with some of the ergonomic items that our golf manager, Mr. Mark Reed, does at the golf course, so he was able to bring those down, and then at the Goleta Slough, we were able once again to control things with using green materials, and it's timing, but yet, once again, you just never know. And we do have what's known as gamusa fishes that are in these sloughs and such that do a good job of controlling mosquitoes, and so that's the fish that does that organically, and so we had an increase on those types of fishes too. So,
thank you.
Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
Along this line, could you make a comment, Santos, about the condition of our local oak trees? I know Mr. Downey is the arborist here in town, but it just seems like everywhere I go in the community, the oak trees have lost their foliage, and there's these little moths flying around.
Yeah. Definitely. Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Casebeer, in regards to the oak worm, you're definitely correct that this year has been just a bad year for oak worm moth, and it's attacking what's known as our coast live oaks, or Quercus agrifolia, and they are being attacked, and the worm is eating the leaves and dropping them off. But I'm very confident within 4 to 6 weeks you'll see a rebound on these particular trees, and you'll see a brand new flush of green leaves, and it's a phenomena, and the worms will be gone. And it's one of these things that goes up and down, and we just let nature take its course, because nature does phenomenal things, as you're well aware.
Yeah, so there's no need to apply any pesticides or anything. Nature takes care of it.
Correct. At times, you could go through, if the timing was correct, you could use what's known as BTI or Bacillus thuringiensis to apply it, but the timing has to be so exact. And it's just really difficult. So most of the time when you start to do these types of things, you're basically just spending hard-earned money for naught, because even the BTI sometimes is so slow to control it that it's wasted.
Thank you.
We discussed this, Mr. Casebeer, at the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, actually, earlier this month. And Mr. Downey basically said if the Quercus agrifolia, the coast live oak, is healthy, then the it's going to be defoliated by the worm, and then it's going to come back. And I mean, I've seen this in my neighborhood where last year our trees were just devastated. There were no leaves on them at all, and they did come back. But he did say if the tree is compromised in any way, if it's weak from something else, it may not come back. But generally, they all come back, and it's a adopt a do nothing attitude, and just wait it out. So, is there any other? Yes, Mr. Ferrara. We do, but I actually have a couple comments first, if you don't mind. So, okay, I had a question about mulch installation. So, in 2011, 840 yards, very commendable. That's a lot of mulch. Is that up from last report, or down, or about the same, or?
It's about the same.
Okay. I was curious about that. So, and I was pretty amazed that, well, overall we've seen a 17.7% decrease in the use of pesticides this year which is great. Commend everyone on that. And I was amazed to see that 94% of the use is for mosquito control, which is an astounding number. I mean, that just, it's pretty amazing. So, and I did have a question for Mark Reed. I hate to call you up here for one lousy little question.
Otherwise, it would have been a wasted evening coming down, though.
I was curious in your report, because all the reports discussed the top three things. In parks, it was weeds, then gophers, and then bees and yellow jackets. In the golf club, it was a golf course. It was plant disease, vertebrates, and weeds invasive. And my question was, is the plant disease related to the new plantings that are at the course, or I was surprised to see that as your top item?
Chair Wiscombe, members of the commission, it's a disease. We have several diseases throughout the season that attack different varieties of turf grass. It's mostly to the greens.
Okay.
The fairways do get some disease, small brown patch diseases, but we are unable to spray those, so it's just concentrated to the greens.
So it's the turf grasses then that are okay.
That's correct.
And then you're planting more bent grass to compensate for the loss of turf when there is a disease problem.
That's correct, and it's more disease tolerant.
Okay, and you're also doing your tea, your micro brew, is that?
Teas and seaweed.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I commend you on that. The golf course bar chart was pretty dramatic. It went from here down to here in terms of use of things, and the methods that you're using are really great. And most people comment, my husband plays golf a lot out there, but I've heard this from other people that the golf course is in great shape. I know you're doing your overseeding now, so golfers are complaining, but...
And it wasn't too bad. It went relatively smoothly. We finished yesterday. The course is open, and I think tomorrow will be 6 months since we made a fungicide application. So things are really improving.
You're going to have a cake to celebrate?
Well, we have the money now that we used to use on fungicides.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for
Thank you.
that. So those are my comments, and yes, I do believe we need a motion to, yeah.
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. I just would like to recommend that the City Council accept the Integrated Pest Management's 2011 Annual Report.
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mr. Escobar, thank you. That was a great report, and thank you for all the work you do in IPM. I know it's a big job because you're kind of the head honcho coordinator of everything. So thank you. Okay, so we are now moving on to agenda item number 7, which is the 2008 City Infrastructure Financing Task Force Report, and this again is for action. So, Ms. Rep?
Chair Wiscombe, if we could take just a minute. Ms. McGill, could you come fix that?
Help.
And then, Commission, I'm going to actually move and sit down in the lower seat. I'm not going to ask Mr. Escobar to stay just to advance my PowerPoint. He was at council last night until fairly late, so no.
Ms. Rapp, I have just one other thing I wanted to mention that wasn't brought up, but there are 2 Easter egg hunts coming up on.
Yes.
Which date? Is that Saturday or Sunday?
It's Saturday, and it's, I want to say, hang on just a second. It is the 7th.
Saturday the 7th at 10 o'clock at
Chase Palm Park.
And Parque de los Niños.
Yes, right.
The tradition goes on, and so I encourage families to bring those kids out and rot their teeth.
Great. That's not going to happen in one day, I don't think. But
Good for dentistry.
Okay. So the report tonight is on the Infrastructure Financing Task Force report, which was a report that was put together by a Citizens Advisory Committee for City Council back in 2008. And it was presented to the Commission at that time. And Commissioner Burns recently attended a City Council meeting and made a comment during public comment that the city has been through a number of years of budget challenges and that it is time to go back and revisit the recommendations of this task force having to deal with the long-term health of the city's infrastructure. And with that, I realized that we have some new commissioners that were not on the commission when the report was completed, and I thought that since the Parks and Recreation Department manages 46% of the general fund facilities and buildings, and we comprise a large component of the city's general fund capital program. And you know very well the challenges that we have had in maintaining our infrastructure. So what my plan is to give you a quick review of the report, which was included in your packet. I'm going to summarize both the financial recommendations and the management and policy recommendations, and then give you just a quick look at some progress which has been made, even though the city has been struggling through the recession. With that, as I mentioned, the task force was created. It came out of some city council discussions about the capital improvement program and some challenges that we were having in terms of funding and maintaining our infrastructure. So council created the Infrastructure Financing Task Force. The task force was to review and make recommendations on the city's capital program and the planning process, the city's overall finances, budgetary practices, reserve policies, and financing for capital, and to develop specific recommendations to best meet the current and future capital financing needs. And I wanted to just mention the citizens that were appointed to serve on this community because I think it reflects the level of concern that the city council had. Dick Jensen was the chair. He's a retired finance executive from UCSB. Dr. Stephen Kurtzer, who's the CEO of several tech companies. Renee Grubb with Village Properties, Frank Skipper from Frank Skipper Construction, Dudley Morris, a management consultant, Robert Geis, the auditor controller with the County of Santa Barbara, and our own Scott Burns, who is a commercial mortgage brokerage consulting firm and an esteemed Park and Recreation commissioners. And I will say that it was his involvement with this task force that led to him being involved with the Park and Recreation Commission and why he has referenced this report several times to the Commission whenever we have brought up budgetary issues in our capital program. So in addition to the citizens that served, the city administrator, the finance director, the public works director, and the community development director all served on the task force. They conducted their own research, they interviewed other cities, and they reviewed various reports within the industry and within the city. And they then developed their report and recommendations for the city. So just quickly, the task force report itself was called Keeping Santa Barbara in Shape. It was presented to City Council in October of 2008. And Council received the report and then referred it to the Finance Committee to work with staff to review the report and develop recommendations. The Finance Committee had it on their agenda and worked on the report November 2008 and again in March 2009. And then, unfortunately, the city was involved in responding to the economic downturn, and so truly, you know, the work on the task force recommendations was largely suspended, although not completely, and we'll talk a little bit about some things that have been completed. So some highlights from the report were that the city is in fact well managed and in reasonable financial shape. Not unlike other state and local governments, the city faces critical challenges in keeping up the infrastructure. And the city was commended for the comprehensive capital program, including funded and unfunded projects. And that was something that was the improvements were made at the same time that the task force was meeting. So this was a tremendous achievement. Although the task force did note that the city needed to, within the capital program, have a system for prioritizing projects among competing interests, so that you really had a way of looking at which projects should be considered first. And that the city has made good use of bonds and debt service, certificates of participation, the RDA funds, Measure D and UUT funds, federal and state grants, using those funds to either leverage for other grants and to fund improvements. The city's greatest challenge in this regard is the general fund, no surprise. In 2008, 33% of the capital improvement program was unfunded, and primarily that was the general fund portion. And of the general fund portion, 83% was unfunded, and these are the numbers in 2008. And the task force spent quite a bit of time looking at the deferred maintenance, because oftentimes deferred maintenance is separate from capital. Can be smaller projects and just the routine maintenance that you would do to keep up a facility. And there's substantial deferred maintenance in general fund facilities, and it's growing every year. The task force recommended a combined approach, strong leadership, fiscal discipline, increasing operational efficiencies, generating new revenue, and greater public education about the importance to invest in our infrastructure, and that the city must operate more efficiently and stimulate revenue growth. The task force developed 12 financing recommendations, and I am just summarizing here, so they're complete in your packet. One of the recommendations was to dedicate 2 to 3% of existing annual operating budgets to infrastructure needs. So, for instance, for Parks and Recreation, 2 to 3% is, in order for us to do that, we would have to reduce services in some way in order to dedicate more funds to preserving our infrastructure. Difficult, challenging, but that was the suggestion. That the city commit to an annual off-the-top 10% general fund capital allocation. So before the city gives all of the general fund departments what their budget target will be for the year, they would take 10% off and put it into capital, and that those funds could be used to actually fund projects or pay for debt service, so loans that would be dedicated to capital improvements. They recommended that City Council review and revise their capital reserve policies, some fiscal policies related to depreciation and facility renewal, that they fully fund the city's annual facility renewal program. And in 2008, that program was identified at a cost of $2.1 million a year. However, in 2008, only $1.4 million of that was funded. So even the annual facility renewal program was underfunded. They recommended that council consider a half-cent sales tax increase, with that increase being dedicated to infrastructure. New general obligation bonds, and there was quite a bit of discussion in the report about the waterfront area, and recommending that the waterfront increase their slip fees to market rates, and I'll come back to that when we talk about some other recommendations that they had. And several recommendations related to expanding public-private partnerships, which we have talked about as a commission over the last few years, and some of the things that we've done to help resolve our budget challenges. There were 9 management and policy recommendations. First, and very strongly, was that the city needed to prioritize public safety, health and public safety, and in particular, making fire and police infrastructure the highest priority. And that they work to free up existing funds for infrastructure. So one of their suggestions was to shift certain parks and recreation operations that take place down in the beach and the waterfront park areas, transfer those operations and or financial responsibilities to the waterfront department, which is an enterprise fund. And this is where the discussion of increasing slip fees comes in. The slip fees have been challenged in the past as being below the market rate. And I will come back and talk about this in a little bit more depth, but shifting those operations to the waterfront was covered in several areas of the task force report. They recommended that the city look at discontinuing underutilized or outdated programs, again, that would allow you to shift money from operations to infrastructure, implement zero-based budgeting every 5 years, and to close, lease, or sell certain general fund facilities that would again give either a one-time or ongoing influx of funds that could be dedicated to infrastructure, to renew, update resolutions and policies, and to implement a management information report to track the progress that the city was making in dealing with their tremendous infrastructure needs. They also recommended an upgrade to the city's capital infrastructure budgeting process, and that's covered in more detail in the report. They recognized the 2 issues, social issues that were affecting the city were gangs and homelessness, and how that affects revenues, and that they encouraged the city to be proactive in that regard. They strongly encourage developing public education on the importance of well-maintained and adequately funded infrastructure. And it's just pretty common, whether it's state, county, or city, people have a difficult time wanting to have increased taxes to support their infrastructure needs, public infrastructure. It just is a difficult sell at times. And finally, they recommended that there be a detailed implementation plan that included an annual report to council. So as I mentioned, since 2008, some of what was suggested has been implemented by the city over time. As you know from our budget presentations and discussions over the last 2 or 3 years, we have in fact taken on the discussion of shifting some parks and recreation, waterfront, beach area responsibilities or financial responsibilities over to the waterfront. And this was a big discussion because theoretically, according to federal legislation, monies that are generated in the waterfront area need to be reinvested into the waterfront area. And that does in fact happen. We generate, Parks and Recreation generates money in the waterfront area, and that money goes to support the maintenance of our parks and facilities in the waterfront area. But if you were to look at the 2 department operations, the waterfront department and the Parks and Recreation department, one being general fund, one being enterprise fund, there are opportunities to look at that model in even different ways than what was done. So over the last few years, we have seen the Parks and Recreation Department being paid by the Waterfront Department for maintenance of waterfront parking lots, where that used to be provided to the general fund. So now the Waterfront Department does pay for that service. Additionally, we have several of our park restrooms, which used to be maintained by the Parks and Recreation in the Parks Division budget, and now those are maintained by the Waterfront Department. And our beach lifeguard service, we still operate that program, but the cost for that program is actually charged to the Waterfront Department. So the city has had, and the City Council has had, difficult discussions about how to do that, what's the proper balance, and I'm sure that it will be a continuing discussion. But, and the one, I think, difference that was these actions that were taken in the last few years were taken to protect general fund monies so that we didn't have to make such difficult service cuts, whereas the recommendations from the task force were do these things to free up your some of your general fund existing budget to support infrastructure. So the things are happening, they just were for a different purpose. The city has, in fact, developed a list of surplus properties that are, in fact, in the process of being readied for public sale. And the recommendation was that where appropriate, those properties go to fund city infrastructure general fund properties. And certain general fund facilities have, in fact, been leased to others. Two examples that we did as budget assists for us were the Teen Center being leased to the Police Activities League, and even more importantly, our Las Positas tennis facility, which transitioned over to Elings Park, and that reduced our capital, unfunded capital, because Elings Park is taking that on. The city has used RDA funds to do all the seismic repairs and improvements at Fire Station 1, and that has been completed. A new PD building, a part of that's been prioritized by the city. Unfortunately, we will most likely not be able to access the RDA funds that were intended to support that project, but it's certainly, the project itself has steam, and the city is definitely looking at how to fund that. There is an improved assessment and planning for facilities renewal, so that is through the Public Works Facilities Management. And so the city is doing a much better job of recognizing and documenting what are our issues and what do we need, and then planning for that. And I'm sure you're aware of the different programs that the city has been engaged in related to reducing youth violence, gang activity, and homelessness. And the last one, the reserve policies have actually been a focus of the council at a couple of discussions, and just this week we're scheduled to go to the Finance Committee, but it's been rescheduled, I believe, for next week. The reserve policies are being reviewed, and there's a number of recommendations from the staff related to the city's reserve policies. And I cannot remember if I put that report in your packet or not. If not, I will email a copy of it to you, since the meeting will most likely be rescheduled to Tuesday. But one of the most important things related to the the staff report for the Finance Committee references the recommendations from the Infrastructure Financing Task Force in several places. And the city administrator is making a recommendation to council that as we are now seeing city revenues restore, come up, and the economy is looking better, that the city council consider a policy which would dedicate surplus reserves in the general fund 50-50, 50% to replenishing reserves and 50% into a capital sinking fund. And that as the reserves are replenished, that the any surplus revenues be dedicated to capital infrastructure improvements. So that will go as a recommendation to the Finance Committee. So although I know the task force was disappointed at the timing of the report and action not being taken, but I agree with Commissioner Burns that I think it's time to revisit the recommendations, and as the city begins to grow out of the recession, that we not lose sight of our infrastructure needs. And I know from experience, and I see it with my staff, and this leads into the next discussion that we're going to have on the FY13 budget, you start seeing more revenue come in, and all of a sudden you think of all these fun and great things that you would like to do, and I think this is really the time where we really need to look and make sure that our house is in good shape. So that was the report and where we are. I did think that I would give you just a quick look at the 2012 to 2017 capital program. The Commission received a report on this capital program in November of last year. So I'm just recapping some numbers here. The general fund portion of that capital improvement program, 111 million of it is unfunded. In Parks and Recreation, that's 33 projects at 46 million, and the majority of that is unfunded. Since 2009, we've seen funding for 10 projects reduced or eliminated. The loss of RDA, of course, you've had a report on that, and affected many of our funded and planned projects. We have seen our grant opportunities significantly decline as both private and public agencies have responded to the economy. And, we were very lucky, and for the last 15 years really benefited from some state parks grant monies that the city was able to put to good use to do some important projects. And all of those grant funds, different propositions, have now been completed as far as Parks and Recreation is concerned. And given the challenges at the state level, I don't know that we'll see that kind of opportunity come up again in the near future. And just for fiscal year 2013, currently the proposed general fund capital for the department, $25,000 to Kids World, and that's just to move the study and planning forward for the eventual rehabilitation of Kids World. And as you know, Mesa Lane Steps, the continuing project, and this is the last piece of funding in addition to grant funding that we're hoping to have in place so that we can move that forward. And I think that is the end of my presentation, and I will try to answer any questions that the Commission has, but I maybe would like to suggest to Chair Wiscombe that we ask Commissioner Burns to maybe give some framing comments to the discussion, given his involvement with the task force.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. My understanding is that we want to forward our comments and recommendations to City Council on this particular document, and whether that comes as the whole document or pieces of the document, I think that's the intent of the discussion, correct?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, I do not feel that the Commission needs to weigh the different recommendations. I really feel that City Council has tasked the Finance Committee with making those recommendations and bringing them back. But if the Commission wants to make comments and recommendations related to the importance of the report and revisiting some of that, I think that that would be appropriate, given that the Finance Committee is going to be discussing this, and obviously Council has a continuing concern.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Rapp. Mr. Burns, yes.
Thank you. And Nancy, that was, I think, a very good report. And my basic comment would be, if we could have a comparable presentation that you made for us given to the City Council, with the realization we have a new City Council relatively, so they will understand what this task force did, the decisions they came up with, and also the recommendations that have already taken place, so that we use some information and use it wisely. So my basic recommendation is we accept the report and say that as much of it as possible, that you could almost use the same slide presentation to City Council and say, this is what we're doing, and maybe the Finance Committee will say, well, we want to tweak it this way. Maybe they'll say, well, these properties that are for sale, maybe we should lease them. There's a lot of little things you can tweak, but I'm just, with the recognition that we now have an opportunity to maybe do some things that need to be done. The comment in 07 and 08 was, it was costing us we should spend about $2.1 million annually to maintain our existing infrastructure or facilities, and we only had $1.4 million, so we were losing every year $700,000. So 4 years later, we've got that much more in deferred maintenance. So we can't just, we need to spend money maintaining our properties. That's that's where I would be going from, is let's make sure City Council looks at this closely before they spend a lot of money on other items.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Longstreet.
I think we're also right now at a crossroads, because there's been some major changes since this report came out, with the demise of the RDA and some of our more traditional funding methods. So it is really appropriate timing to have it go back to Council to look at these recommendations and, look to the future and how we save money to do this. How do we fund these things? So the timing's excellent for this. And the other comment I would have is now, 4 years later, we do have a leaner machine in the city. So some of those things have been achieved as we go forward. Also, we're really cognizant of our revenues, and we need to look at maintaining the facilities that bring us those revenues that allow us to do the other things. So those would be my reasoning, that it's so important right at this time to move forward in a constructive way with a sort of a new paradigm for how we keep our city together, our facilities.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Farrar, yes.
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe. Yeah, I think it's a good report. It's a wonderful report that should go to City Council. But I would wonder if the information in this report, since it was completed in 2008, much of that information may have changed since then. And so is it wise to revisit the infrastructure financing report and then factor in all the changes that have taken place, as like the loss of RDA funds and such, to just fine-tune it and bring it up to date and then present it to the council and recommend it at that time?
Just since I was kind of on the task force, I'm going to make like I'm staff for a second. In the report, which was done in 2008, on one of the pages, it's talking about the sunset of the redevelopment agency in 2015. We were cognizant that was going to happen. It's happened 3 years earlier. We were still knew that it was going to happen. My thought is, I don't think we really need to take a new report, get a whole new advisory committee, and look at it. I think the direction they came up with, the report that staff came up with, there's some changes. We have less staff. Maybe we don't need as many buildings. I mean, some things like that. But I think City Council with this policy, it should be able to handle it. It was more the infrastructure task force position was, this is what we think needs to be done. You staff figure out how we're going to do it. I think we're still at that level, that the staff should be able to.
Right, and that was my only concern, that they might not come back and say, well, this has changed and that has changed, so what about that? And then if there is something that needs to be changed prior to it going to them fine-tuned, that was my only concern. But as you say, if everything is, it's not that, the quality hasn't changed, there's no quantity difference. I mean, everything stays the same. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Burns is saying, which is good, is accept the report as it is, and there are changes in it. The golf course, for instance, is listed as a, I think of, what's the word? It was, high level. It was listed as a low level of concern in this report, and we all know now that the golf course is a high level of concern and not a low level of concern, or at least that would be the preliminary conclusion that I would reach without having any facts to back it up. But at any rate, I think that Mr. Burns' point is well taken, that we accept the report as it is with the additional presentation that Ms. Rapp made to show the progress and perhaps the additional comments that, now is the time to make a commitment to rebuilding. It's clear that there are members of City Council that are very concerned about our deferred maintenance. I think there are things in this report that, even though it's grown a lot since 2008, there are things in this report that that deal with it. For instance, implementing the management information report to enable council to track and review progress on reducing deferred maintenance backlog. Those kinds of things are still here and they're still current. So I think what we want to do is perhaps recommend that council revisit the report, and with the addition of the progress that has been made in certain areas and some obvious changes that, for instance, the golf course that, maybe doesn't belong where it is in this report, but, and not reinvent the wheel, but the bones of making a commitment to rebuild and recognizing the fact that we have significant infrastructure needs and we need to address them. How we get there is not our concern, but at least we're showing council that we believe this is the bones of how we get there with the additional information on some of the progress that's been made. Is that clear as mud?
I'll second the motion.
Yes. No, I think that's exactly true. I think it voices our concern as a commission that as we're coming out of this recession, that we really do care about how to keep what we have for our future generations, to maintain and to really take what we've learned the last few years and apply it.
Right. Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
I just have an observation, and
I was hoping you were going to make a motion.
but
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
You made it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let me go ahead. And
We're into discussion now. Go for it.
It was interesting to me to see one of the findings and recommendations in this report was to assess the potential for adding a 5% or 0.5% local sales tax. And this was back 3.5 years ago. And now, in present day time, the city will be given the opportunity to consider this type of half-cent sales tax. The mayor is proposing an Invest in Santa Barbara. I have not scrutinized the present-day proposal, but how would the funds be allocated for programs or for infrastructure improvements? Does anyone have some knowledge on this?
I attended that meeting.
Yes.
And I don't think that's been determined. And I think that's, again, why it's crucial that this report be revisited so that when competing interests start, and there will be many, that we look back to the work that was done over months with experts to guide us. You know, sometimes we put these reports on the shelf, and they were really important that moment, and then we just go off and do it again, and or go a different direction. And I think there's value in what we have here. So I don't think it's been determined how that money would be divvied up, and that's.
Good. I would like to make a motion that we accept the report and recommend that a presentation with the additions commented and the comments made go forward to City Council.
Second.
Okay, and would the maker of the motion be willing to emphasize that it's time to make a commitment to rebuilding, and the commission recognizes that we have significant infrastructure needs, and that's why we're...
Yes, that's exactly what I meant to say.
Okay. Does the seconder of the motion agree? Okay. Did you get that, Carly? Yeah, okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Chair Wiscombe and
Yes.
Commissioners, so what we will do is we will extract the various comments that were made, and that will go into a memo with that motion to Council. I do want to emphasize the Council has already accepted the report, so the appropriate terminology of revisit the report is probably more correct. And I also did want to address Commissioner Ferrara's comments, because I think it was good, but I did want to just talk a little bit to why I don't think the gist of it has changed. The city has actually updated their capital program since this report was done. And that report is a more accurate reflection of what's planned and what's been funded and what hasn't. And some of that did change with the RDA, but we don't actually know what funding is going to remain with RDA funds, and we probably won't know that for the next several months. But that's very much in the mind of City Council. The other numbers really don't matter too much, although some things may change, because I think the key discussion issues will be about the funding and policy recommendations, and that doesn't change whether it's 111 million or 141 million. So I appreciate that, because the report was 4 years ago, but I don't think that the key aspects that would be discussed are affected by that. But thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think your comments were very well taken, but it is it is still a timely document. It still works today. We still have the same issues that we had back then. So, okay, we are now moving on to new business agenda item number 8. Which is the fiscal year 2013 budget preview for discussion.
This is my busy night.
I know.
I'm just moving from chair to chair. Okay. Madam Chair and Commissioners, I felt that it would be good to give the Commission kind of this overview, because next month we'll be presenting our department budget, and then we'll be focused on all the numbers and all of that. And the discussion today is just to let you know some of the planning process that staff has been going through as we've approached this budget. And so I wanted to just start with that. And fiscal year 2013 is the second year of a 2-year budget. And the city has not done a 2-year budget in several years as we were responding to the difficult economic situation that we had. We did 1-year budgets because we couldn't begin to project what was going to happen to city revenues in the next year. But now we are in the second year of a 2-year budget. This is typically this period that we're in, and looking at it as a mid-cycle review of the budget. And typically, the second year of a 2-year budget is a much less labor-intensive process. Generally, you're reviewing the budget that you've already put together for any major changes to it, which would be, for instance, looking at the city revenues, where our projections, where they should be, how does that change the amount of money that the departments have to spend, et cetera. And so that leads me into the next part, which is good. City revenues are actually coming in stronger than were projected at this time last year. And so general fund departments have been, and actually all departments have been, asked to provide a status quo budget, so equal to what was presented for last year. No reductions, no service cuts. And one of the other aspects that is good for us is that with the improving economy, we are seeing some of our primarily recreation revenues come in again above budget. So that allows us, if we're going to make an additional $100,000 in revenue over what we had budgeted, that allows us the flexibility of increasing our expenditure budget by $100,000. So we spent a lot of time before staff went off and developed their budgets. We asked them to start with their revenue projections. And then, it would be, I think the usual practice that if your program is making more money, you get to spend it. And what we really needed to do was to have everybody on board to do an evaluation of what we currently have, where do we have the resources that we need in the right place, do we have the best resources, the right resources. We also have been, in order to take away some of the pain from the budget cuts, we've pulled back on investing in equipment replacement and deferred maintenance and facility improvements, because we could do that for a couple of years, but now we have a backlog and we need to address some of those things. So staff went through a process to identify unfunded needs in a variety of areas, and then we really sat down and prioritized what did we need where. And I'm going to go through some of those and kind of give you a sense of what we did, but it's basically a 7-page list that I didn't include because it's a working tool, but it's very reflective of, realizing where we need to start putting money back in order to be a good, solid, functioning department before we start talking about restoring services or service levels that had been reduced over the last few years. We're coming from a place of being a smaller organization. We saw our general fund subsidy reduced by 28%. And our workforce by 26%. And, so the opportunity to maybe put a little back in different places, we really want to be very strategic where that is concerned. And I've, really tried to encourage staff to think about, do we have the right resources in place to provide safe, good quality services for the longer term. And we have taken a lot of position reductions where they happened. So we had somebody who left the organization in one program, and we might not have even cut from there when we were trying to decide where would we cut, but they were leaving, so we took that because we didn't want to have to lay off somebody else. And we did a lot of reorganizations and restructuring. And people have been, in some parts of the department getting by for a couple of years. But my concern is I'm seeing that there are some parts of the department which are that is not sustainable for the longer term. When people feel like their job is not doable, that's not sustainable for the longer term. So all that to say, we really have spent quite a bit of time talking through the list that staff has put together, and I feel like we have a good handle on what we are proposing. The list as it is now, and it's evolving because we keep, adding to it, but it's about $1 million. About 2/3 of that is actually one-time monies, one-time expense. So you buy a piece of equipment once. You're not having to do it every year. And about 1/3 of that is ongoing expense. So that helps us know, so as we start making more money, where do we want to put money back in? And if we are in a position where City Council begins to look at restoring a level of funding or positions, we kind of know where our needs are. So referring to the report, I'm just going to go through just a few examples and talk about it. So we have identified about $180,000 in ongoing staffing needs. So, and that could be, I've given you a couple of examples here. One is a permanent position. We had a full-time pool maintenance position, and with reorganizing and a vacancy and having to cut, we reduced it down to half-time. Probably not feasible that we can restore it back to full-time, but it needs to be. But we are at least proposing or looking for funding to increase it up to .80 full-time. And that's $18,000. And then we also have a priority of restoring 600 hourly staff hours in parks in order to restore the turf management program. We feel that that is really important, and that cost is $15,000. So just a couple of examples that we are looking at. In equipment, we have facilities that generate a lot of revenue to the department in rentals to individuals, companies, et cetera. And luckily, going into this recession, we were in pretty good shape. Our equipment, we'd replaced our tables and chairs because we have an annual fund that that we had used to replace that equipment and keep up with it. But over the years, the last few years, we've cut into that fund, as I said, so we now have a lot of catch-up of replacing some tables and chairs and podiums and things that are related to our rental facilities that are a priority for us. And then we also have things like there are new federal regulations related to ADA access into swimming pools. And our cost to comply with that in one pool is $12,000. So these are the kinds of things that would typically just be absorbed in the department's operating budget. So it's not, we don't go to anybody and we say, we've got this new expense, can we have more money to do that? And it's typically the thing that we just make decisions and find the money. And then Parks has a tenant sweeper, which is a motorized sweeper. It's a sit-on-top sweeper that reduces man-hours for cleaning walkways and parking lots, and that's $65,000. And then moving on to program, there's just under $100,000 identified there, and this is the one area that is not comprehensive at all because this list does not include restoring any services that were reduced. But looking at our current responsibilities, the first example is restoring contract park maintenance funding, which Santos uses for a variety of different things to maintain the different parks. So this is contract services. But, we've just done all that work in the bird refuge. And to maintain the removal of the tules and the restoration maintenance, we're looking at an ongoing expense each year of $45,000. So that's a priority for us, to take care of the investment that we've already made. So somewhere we need to find that $45,000 in our ongoing budget so that we're maintaining it. At restoring funding for summer camp scholarships, again, we're not seeing that as restoring a lot of services. That's something that we're currently doing. We really need to put some of those funds back to do scholarships. Deferred maintenance, again, these are not things that you would see in capital. These are things that we would typically do. So replacing the backstop fence at Pershing Park softball field number 2 is a one-time expense, $10,000. Or replacing the 52-year-old irrigation system at Willow Glen Park, which is $65,000. And we have facility improvements as well. These are things that generally are improvements, improving our parks or facilities for our users, whether it's security lighting or installing irrigation systems in areas where we're currently hand watering. So you get the gist. A lot of different needs. We have really been looking at our current fiscal year because our revenues have come in above budget. We're projecting right now maybe $45,000 above budget for this year. And we would need to go to City Council and have City Council budget that money in our revenue and then budget it in our expense so that we can spend it. So we're going to do that. We've been discussing with the city administrator our backlog in delayed equipment replacements, and he understands that, and so he has given us permission that within our existing budget, typically departments are not allowed to spend any savings that they have that come from vacant positions or anything like that. Usually you can spend your money in the supplies and services, but typically any funds that you have up there, you have to ask permission to spend. That's what the city uses to help have their carryover going into the next year. They figure, you know, you're working within your budget, and that's a legitimate savings. But on a one-time basis, he has given us permission to spend any savings that we have in salaries and benefits, and we will be able to use some of that for some of those one-time purchases as well. So we won't know the full extent of the big dent that we'll be able to put into that list with the one-time equipment this year. We'll have a better sense of that as we, you know, see how our revenues do going April into May. But we are actually hopeful that we'll be able to buy down some of those things. For FY13, we spent the most time looking at the staffing and looking at how can we reprioritize within our existing funds where we need the money to be. So I'll just give you a quick example. We had a vacant position in one of the programs, and we decided that by restructuring with some permanent part-time and some hourly, we can actually meet the needs in 4 different programs with that one position. So, and then, you know, so we're doing some shuffling, and when we present our budget, we'll be talking about some of that. But in the FY13 budget, we're focused mostly on how can we start bringing back some of those expenses that are on an ongoing basis. Once we make the commitment, we got to fund it this year, next year, and the year after that. So, and then the last thing that I did want to mention is that because our equipment needs and deferred maintenance were really so substantial, as I mentioned, we did talk with the city administrator about our challenge, and he has indicated that as they continue to refine the 2013 budget and they look at their capital funds, that perhaps other departments may be in the same situation as us and need some one-time monies to help address some of those deferred expenses within 2013. So there is a possibility that we might be able to go that route as well. So, but that's really the discussion that I wanted to bring. I wanted to share the information with you. I think when you get the budget next month, you know, we will have talked about some of the things that we've been able to cover. But it's been a good process for staff. I think it keeps us focused on the priorities. And similar to the discussion that we had earlier, you know, it's people are much more interested in doing something new with new money and trying to get people focused on let's make sure that we can take care of what we got And that's really been the theme in both of these presentations. So, and that's the conclusion of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Rapp. You have questions? Yes, Ms. Longstreet?
A comment. Oh, thank goodness. You know, it's fine. It just feels so much better to not hear we have to cut. What do you want to, do you want to give up an arm or a leg? Which is what it felt like for so long. And, just appreciation of the staff for all the work they've done the last 3.5 years to make this, to keep the department going, to provide services to the community. And, yes, I wish we could just do fun stuff because they deserve to have that. But, and the community does also. But just, you've done an excellent job in paring down the department and maintaining the services for the residents of the city. And now, it feels good to not have to cut anymore this year.
Yes, Mr. Ferrara?
I don't know whether this is the appropriate time for my comment. It basically has to do with one of the funding priorities in this report here, and on the Ambassador Park sprinkler system. I understand, and I'm quite concerned about our sensitivity towards installing and digging in. That's actually an archaeologically and historic sensitive area. And Ambassador Park is located within the area of the historical Chumash village of Suxton, and which is by Burton's Mound. And the midden of Burton's Mound does reach or may reach into Ambassador Park. So I just want to put out there that we need to be sensitive to possibly doing that.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, actually, we are very aware of that. And we would typically do studies when we're going to go in and disturb the earth, especially in areas where we haven't for a long time.
Yes, Mr. Burns?
Yeah, thank you for a great report. Two comments. I always think about somebody else's money whenever possible. We're talking about replacing the backstop fence at Pershing Park softball field number 2. You might talk with the Park Foundation, see if they can find someone who's willing to have the backstop fence named after themselves. So instead of Pershing Park softball field number 2 and softball field number 1, we'd have somebody's name on it and get some money to do that. And the other item was the 250 chairs. See if you can find possibly an organization that would like to have their names on the back of them and let them donate it. True, the economy is bad. It's getting a little better. There may be some organization that would be willing to do that. I mean, and maybe by the next report, you may have found that, or you may have said it isn't going to work. But that's my comment.
Okay, I had one question, Ms. Rapp. Are are these net impacts? In other words, have you, if you're, let me just go to, Ambassador Park, currently irrigated by hand, and it's a one-time figure of 28,000. Is that net of the labor that's now involved to irrigate it by hand?
Chair Wiscombe, no, that's the cost to do the installation of the system. But the benefit to the department would be that we could then allocate those staff labor hours to other park needs.
Right, okay. So there's going to be added benefits to this that come out of reducing labor in some of these areas. Okay, I get it. That's good. And my only other, I want to commend the department once again. I mean, we've had reports on the increases in revenues in the programs and how well they're going and the participation, and I just think I know the whole commission feels this way, that it's wonderful that revenues have exceeded expectations. That's so nice to say, exceeded expectations. I love hearing that. So it's great, and the department's to be commended for that. And my only other comment is that I really feel strongly that discussion should continue regarding setting aside general fund capital for deferred maintenance. I mean, I think that's important. That's just such a huge issue now, and I think it's important to really keep that discussion going. And those were my only comments. So, oh yes, Mr. Casebeer, go ahead.
One clarifying question. You mentioned that program revenues are increasing. What about facility income, like Cabrillo Arts or the park rentals?
We are seeing some increases in some facilities. We are not seeing the kind of growth that we saw before, but at least it's either flat or growing incrementally. So we are seeing some increase in the number of reservations at Casa Las Palmas, Chase Palm Park Center, and the Cabrillo Pavilion Arts Center. Those are the three main large dollar rental facilities that we have that generate the most revenue. And then, of course, the Carrillo Recreation Center is helping significantly. And even simple things like picnic revenues, we're seeing that come up. I think people are feeling more confident in the economy and spending money on things that they maybe wouldn't have before. So we are seeing that.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. So I think that concludes us for tonight. Okay. We do, but before that, I'm just going to make the announcement that the next meeting is, regular meeting is April 24th. Is that right? April 25th, Wednesday, April 25th, 2012 at 4 p.m. And now,
Actually, Chair Wiscombe, I'm sorry, because I should have covered this. Please make sure that the dates that I put in that report related to budget go in your calendars. I meant to list those off, but it's basically when all the different budgets are being presented to the Golf Advisory Committee, the Creeks Advisory Committee. We'll be presenting the department budget to you on April 25th, and then we are scheduled to go to council and present our budget on Monday, May 14th at 6 p.m. So you will develop your budget recommendations at your regular meeting of May 23rd. I do not feel you need to have a special meeting, as sometimes you haven't had in the past. And then council would adopt the budget at their regular meeting of June 19th. So the dates are in the report. If you would please just make sure that that you note them in your calendars.
great. Thank you very much, Ms. Rapp. Do I hear a motion?
Motion. I'd like to move that we adjourn.
And
I'll second.
okay, and any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're done. Thank you very much, everybody.